17 years ago, Frank Morrison made one mistake that cost him everything he loved. But when his own children showed up at his door holding a faded photograph, demanding the truth their mother never told them, he realized some secrets are too heavy for a family to carry forever. If you enjoy stories about family, forgiveness, and second chances, feel free to subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. And by the way, let me know in the comments. Where are you listening from? I love hearing from all of you. Frank Morrison knelt on his front porch in Millbrook, Ohio, trying to fix the loose step that had been wobbling for weeks. The Saturday morning sun cast long shadows across Elm Street, and the familiar sounds of small-town life drifted through the air. Lawnmowers humming, dogs barking, children playing somewhere in the distance. It was peaceful, routine. Everything Frank had learned to appreciate in his quiet, solitary life after losing everything that mattered. Then he heard the car door slam. Frank looked up from his work, hammer in hand, and felt his world tilt sideways. A silver Honda Civic sat at his curb, and two teenagers were walking up his cracked sidewalk. Emma, now 17, had her mother's blonde hair but his stubborn chin. Jake, 15, had grown at least 6 inches since Frank had last seen him at the courthouse 2 years ago. Both looked nervous but determined, like they were about to do something they knew they shouldn't. Emma clutched something in her hand. As she got closer, Frank could see it was a photograph. "Dad?" Emma's voice was uncertain but brave. "We need to talk to you." Frank dropped his hammer, the metallic clang echoing through the quiet neighborhood. His hands were shaking. After 2 years of court-ordered distance, after being told by judges and lawyers that he was a danger to his own children, they were standing on his porch. "Emma, Jake." His voice came out as a whisper. "What are you doing here? Your mother. Mom doesn't know we're here." Jake interrupted, his voice deeper than Frank remembered. "We found something at Grandma Helen's house yesterday. Something we think you should see." Emma stepped forward, extending the photograph toward him. Frank recognized it immediately. Their last family vacation to Lake Erie, 3 months before his world collapsed. In the picture, he was teaching Jake how to cast a fishing line while Emma sat nearby braiding wildflowers into a crown. They all looked so happy, so complete. Frank's hands trembled as he took the photo, memories flooding back like a dam bursting. That perfect weekend before everything went wrong, before the accusations, before Linda's betrayal, before the divorce that tore his family apart. He remembered Emma's laughter as she chased fireflies that evening, Jake's pride when he caught his first fish, the way Linda had smiled at him over the campfire. It felt like looking at someone else's life. "You should come inside," Frank managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "Before someone sees you here and tells your mother." Frank unlocked his front door with unsteady hands and led them into his small rental house. The living room was sparse but clean. A couch, a television, a small bookshelf filled with the teaching materials he could never quite throw away. Emma and Jake sat on the edge of the couch, still looking like they might run at any second. "Grandma Helen had boxes of stuff in her attic," Emma said quietly. "Old photos, newspaper clippings, and these." She pulled a bundle of letters from her purse, tied with a blue ribbon. Frank's own handwriting stared back at him. Dozens of letters he'd written over the past 3 years. "I wrote you letters," Frank said, his throat constricting. "Every week for 2 years. Your grandmother promised to make sure you got them, but your mother. Mom told us you didn't want to see us anymore after the divorce," Jake said, his voice tight with years of hurt. She said you chose to leave and never looked back. But these letters, you were begging to be part of our lives." Frank closed his eyes, remembering all those sleepless nights when he'd poured his heart onto paper, telling his children about his days at the grain elevator, asking about their schoolwork, their friends, their dreams. He'd written about missing Emma's junior prom, Jake's baseball games, their birthdays. Every milestone he'd been forced to watch from a distance. "I fought for you," he said simply. "I fought until I had nothing left to fight with." Emma's eyes filled with tears. Why didn't Mom give us these letters? Why did she lie to us? Before Frank could answer, his phone buzzed against the coffee table. A text message from Linda appeared on the screen. "The kids better not be at your place. I'm driving by in 10 minutes. Frank showed them the phone. Emma's face went pale. "She tracks our phones," she whispered. "She must have figured out we're not at the library like we told her." Frank stood up quickly, his mind racing. He had maybe 8 minutes before Linda arrived. 8 minutes to tell his children the truth about why their family had been destroyed. 8 minutes to explain 3 years of heartbreak and separation. "Listen to me carefully," he said urgently. "Your mother is going to be very angry when she gets here, and she's going to say terrible things about me. But you need to know the real reason I lost custody of you." Jake leaned forward. "We heard about the trouble at school, Dad. The accusations from that student." "Melissa Hartwell," Frank said, the name still bitter on his tongue. "She was failing my English class, angry about her grades. The night before she accused me of inappropriate conduct, I had caught your mother with her business partner, David, in our bedroom. We had the worst fight of our marriage." Emma's eyes widened. "Mom was having an affair?" "Linda was terrified I'd expose her relationship with David and ruin her real estate business. 3 days after our fight, Melissa made her accusation. The timing wasn't a coincidence. Your mother encouraged her to file that complaint." Jake's face went white. "You're saying Mom set you up?" "I'm saying your mother was desperate to get me out of the house so she could continue her relationship with David without interference. The school board had no choice but to suspend me pending investigation. By the time Melissa's family quietly left town and she admitted she'd lied, the damage was done." The sound of a car engine grew louder outside. Linda's silver BMW was pulling into the driveway, and Frank could see her furious expression through the windshield. "She's here," Emma whispered. The front door burst open without a knock. Linda Morrison stood in the doorway, her usually perfect appearance disheveled, her face flushed with rage and something else. Fear. "Get away from them, Frank," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "Right now." Emma stood up, still clutching the bundle of letters. "Mom, we just wanted to hear Dad's side of the story. Why didn't you ever give us these letters he wrote?" "Because I was protecting you," Linda snapped, stepping into the living room like she owned it. "Your father is not the man you think he is, Emma. The court determined he was a danger to children for a reason." Frank felt the familiar surge of helpless anger, but this time he forced himself to stay calm. "Tell them about Melissa Hartwell, Linda. Tell them how her family moved to Michigan after she admitted she lied about me." Linda's composure cracked slightly. "I don't know what lies he's been filling your heads with, but—" "They're not lies," Jake interrupted, his young voice strong with conviction. "We found newspaper clippings at Grandma's house, articles about the investigation being dropped, articles about you and David Henderson announcing your engagement just 2 months after the divorce was finalized." Frank watched Linda's face go pale, as she realized her children had discovered far more than she'd expected. The carefully constructed narrative she'd maintained for 3 years was crumbling, and she was scrambling to maintain control. "That has nothing to do with your father's problems," she said weakly, but her voice lacked conviction. Emma held up the photograph from Lake Erie, her young face hard with determination Frank had never seen before. "This picture was taken 3 months before you filed for divorce, Mom. We all look happy. Dad looks like he loves us. So what really changed?" Linda's face flushed red as she realized she was trapped. For 3 years, she had controlled the narrative, painted herself as the protective mother and Frank as the dangerous father. Now her own children were questioning everything she had told them. "What changed?" Linda said slowly. "Was that I finally saw your father for what he really was, a man who couldn't be trusted around children." "But the accusations were false," Emma pressed. "Jake found the newspaper article online. Melissa Hartwell's family issued a public apology before they moved away. They admitted she made it up because she was angry about failing your class, Dad." Frank watched Linda's composure crumble further. She had never expected the children to do their own research, to dig deeper than her carefully crafted version of events. "That doesn't matter," Linda said desperately. "The school board still fired him. The judge still granted me full custody. There were reasons." "The reasons were your lies," Jake said, his young voice strong with newfound understanding. "You wanted Dad gone so you could be with David without anyone judging you." Linda's mask finally slipped completely. "You have no idea what you're talking about. You were children. You don't understand how complicated adult relationships can be." "We understand betrayal," Emma said quietly. "And we understand that you've been lying to us for 3 years about Dad not wanting to see us." Frank felt a surge of pride watching his children stand up for themselves, but he also saw the pain in Linda's eyes. Despite everything she had done to him, he understood her fear. She had made choices she couldn't take back, and now she was facing the consequences. "Linda," he said gently, "they deserve the truth. All of it." "The truth?" Linda laughed bitterly. "You want the truth? Fine. Yes, I was with David. Yes, I encouraged Melissa to file that complaint. But I did it to protect my children from the scandal of having their father accused of—" "So you admit it," Jake interrupted. "You admit you destroyed Dad's life to cover up your own affair." Linda sank into Frank's armchair, suddenly looking older than her 42 years. "I panicked. When you caught me with David that night, Frank, I knew our marriage was over. But I also knew that if the truth came out, it would destroy my business, my reputation, everything I had worked for. When Melissa came to me complaining about her grades, I saw an opportunity." Emma stared at her mother in disbelief. "You used a 17-year-old girl to frame Dad?" "I didn't frame anyone," Linda said weakly. "I just encouraged her to report behavior that I convinced myself might have actually happened. Teachers cross lines with students all the time." "But I didn't," Frank said firmly. "And you knew I didn't. You knew me better than anyone, Linda. You knew I would never hurt a child." Linda looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "I knew, but I was so scared, Frank. Scared of losing everything. Scared of people knowing what I had done to our marriage." Jake sat down heavily on the couch, processing everything he had learned in the past hour. "So for 3 years, you let us believe our father abandoned us, when really you drove him away to protect yourself." Before Linda could answer, Frank's phone rang. The caller ID showed Helen Morrison, his mother. "I should take this," Frank said, stepping into the kitchen. "Mom? What's wrong?" Helen's voice was weak, strained. "Frank, honey, I need you to come to the hospital. I had some chest pains this morning and the doctor says, well, they want to run some tests. I'm at Millbrook General." Frank felt his heart sink. His mother was 72 years old and had been dealing with heart problems for the past year. "I'll be right there, Mom. Are you alone?" "The nurses are taking good care of me, but Frank, if something happens to me, I need you to know that I kept all those letters. I kept them because I believed someday Emma and Jake would need to see them. I couldn't bear to throw away proof of how much you loved them." Frank's throat tightened. "You're going to be fine, Mom. I'm coming now." He hung up and returned to the living room, where Linda, Emma, and Jake were sitting in uncomfortable silence. "I have to go," Frank said. "My mother is in the hospital. She's having heart problems." Emma stood up immediately. "Grandma Helen? Is she okay?" "I don't know yet. I need to get there." Linda wiped her tears and straightened her shoulders, slipping back into her role as the responsible parent. "The children should come with me. This isn't their problem." "She's our grandmother too," Jake said firmly. "We want to see her." Frank looked at his children, then at Linda. For the first time in 3 years, they were facing a family crisis together. "We can all go," he said quietly. "Whatever our problems are, my mother loves all of us." At Millbrook General Hospital, Helen Morrison looked small and fragile in the hospital bed, connected to monitors and IV lines. But her eyes lit up when she saw Emma and Jake walk into the room with Frank. "My beautiful grandchildren," she said weakly. "I wasn't sure I'd see you again." Emma rushed to her bedside and took her hand. "Grandma, we found the letters. We found all of Dad's letters in your attic." Helen's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I should have given them to you years ago, but your mother made me promise." "It's okay, Grandma," Jake said, taking her other hand. "We know the truth now." Linda stood awkwardly by the door, clearly uncomfortable with the family reunion she had tried so hard to prevent. Frank noticed her isolation, and despite everything, felt a pang of sympathy for her. "Doctor." Martinez entered the room with a clipboard, his expression serious. "Mrs. Morrison, we've run several tests, and I'm afraid the news isn't good. You've had a mild heart attack, and your heart function is significantly compromised. We need to discuss your options." Helen squeezed her grandchildren's hands. "How long do I have?" "With proper treatment and lifestyle changes, you could have months or even a couple of years. But your heart is weakening, and another attack could be more serious." Frank felt the room spin slightly. His mother, the one person who had never stopped believing in him, who had kept his letters and preserved his connection to his children, might not have much time left. "There's something else," Helen said, her voice growing stronger with determination. "Something I need to tell all of you while I still can. Linda, come here." Linda reluctantly approached the bed, her face pale. "I have a confession to make," Helen said, looking directly at her former daughter-in-law. "I know about the sealed envelope." Linda's face went white. "What envelope?" "The one you gave me 3 years ago, right after the divorce was finalized. The one you made me promise to keep locked away unless something happened to you. The one that contains the real reason you were so desperate to keep Frank away from the children." Emma and Jake looked confused, but Frank felt a chill run down his spine. He had wondered why Linda had been so extreme in her efforts to cut him out of their lives completely. An affair and a false accusation seemed like enough, but Linda's behavior had always felt like there was something more, something deeper she was hiding. "Grandma," Emma said softly, "what's in the envelope?" Helen's eyes never left Linda's face. "That's your mother's secret to tell. But I won't take it to my grave, Linda. Not when it's kept this family apart for so long." Linda backed toward the door, panic clear in her eyes. "You promised me, Helen. You gave me your word." "I promised to keep it safe until you were ready to tell the truth," Helen said firmly. "I never promised to take your secrets with me when I die. And frankly, I don't think I'm going to last much longer." Frank watched his ex-wife's face cycle through emotions: fear, anger, desperation. Whatever was in that envelope, it was big enough to make Linda willing to destroy his reputation and tear their family apart to keep it hidden. "What could possibly be worse than what we already know?" Jake asked quietly. Linda looked at her son, and Frank saw something break in her expression. After 3 years of lies and manipulation, she was finally cornered with nowhere left to run. Helen reached into the bedside drawer with shaking hands and pulled out a sealed manila envelope, yellowed with age. Linda's name was written across the front in Helen's careful handwriting, along with a date from 3 years ago, just 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized. "No," Linda whispered, backing toward the door. "Helen, please. You don't understand what this will do to them. I understand that lies have kept this family broken for too long," Helen said, extending the envelope toward Frank. "Your father deserves to know why you fought so hard to keep him away from his children." Emma looked between her mother and grandmother, confusion and fear warring in her expression. "Mom, what's in there? What could be worse than everything we've already learned?" Linda's face crumpled completely. After 3 years of maintaining her facade, of being the strong, single mother who protected her children from their dangerous father, she looked utterly defeated. "The paternity test," she whispered. Frank felt the world tilt sideways. "What paternity test?" "After Jake was born," Linda continued, her voice barely audible, "I wasn't sure. David and I had been together longer than I admitted. The timing, I needed to know for certain who Jake's father was." Jake's face went white. He sank into the visitor's chair as if his legs could no longer support him. "You mean I might not be Dad's son?" "The test showed you were Frank's biological child," Linda said quickly. "But I was terrified that someday you might not look like him, might act differently, might make people suspicious. I convinced myself it was safer to keep you both away from Frank entirely rather than risk questions about your paternity." Frank stared at his ex-wife in disbelief. "You destroyed our family because you were afraid of questions that would never come? Jake, you've always looked like me. You have my eyes, my stubborn streak, my love of baseball." "I was paranoid," Linda admitted. "After David left me for his business partner's daughter, I realized I had given up everything for nothing. But by then, the damage was done. I had made you out to be a monster, Frank. I couldn't take it back without admitting to all the lies." Emma stood up abruptly, her face flushed with anger. "So you let us grow up thinking our father abandoned us because you were embarrassed about your affair." "I was protecting you," Linda said desperately. "I was protecting all of us from scandal." "You were protecting yourself," Jake said quietly. "And you made Dad pay the price." Helen struggled to sit up straighter in her hospital bed. "There's more in that envelope." "Show them the letters, Linda." The ones you wrote but never sent. Linda's composure broke completely. I can't. I can't let them see those. Frank opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were 3 letters in Linda's handwriting, addressed to him but never mailed. He unfolded the first one, dated 6 months after their divorce. Dear Frank, he read aloud, his voice catching. I miss you every day. I miss the way you made pancakes on Sunday mornings, the way you helped Emma with her math homework, the way you cheered at Jake's Little League games. I know I have no right to miss you after what I've done, but I can't help it. Sometimes I catch myself reaching for the phone to call you about something funny Jake said, or to ask your advice about Emma's teenage attitude, and then I remember that I destroyed that privilege when I chose to protect my reputation over our family. Emma started crying. Jake put his arm around his sister, his own eyes filled with tears. Frank continued reading. I tell myself that keeping the children away from you is for their own good, but the truth is it's for mine. I'm terrified that if you spend time with them, if you see how much they need their father, you'll fight for custody. And I'm even more terrified that you'll win. Because deep down I know you're the better parent. You always were. Mom, Emma whispered. How could you write this and still keep us apart? Linda sat down heavily, her face buried in her hands. Because I was a coward. Because admitting I was wrong would have meant admitting I had wasted 3 years of your lives, 3 years of your father's life. It felt easier to keep pretending. Frank set down the first letter and picked up the second. This one was dated just 6 months ago. This one's different, he said, scanning it quickly. Linda, you were going to tell them the truth? I wrote that letter the night before Emma's 17th birthday, Linda said, her voice muffled by her hands. I watched her blow out her candles and make a wish, and I knew she was wishing for her father to come home. I realized I couldn't keep living with what I had done. But you never sent it, Jake pointed out. David came back, Linda admitted. He had left his young girlfriend and wanted to try again with me. I thought maybe if we got married, if we became a real family, it would justify everything I had done. I convinced myself that bringing Frank back into your lives would just confuse you. Helen reached for Linda's hand with surprising strength. But David left again, didn't he? Linda nodded miserably. Last month. He said I was too damaged by guilt and regret to be in a healthy relationship. He was right. Dr. Martinez returned to the room with a nurse, interrupting the family revelation. Mrs. Morrison, we need to discuss your treatment options. Your family is welcome to stay, but we should talk about what happens next. Doctor, Helen said firmly, I need a few more minutes with my family. We're in the middle of something important. The doctor nodded and left, promising to return in 15 minutes. Helen turned to Emma and Jake. I want you both to understand something. Your father never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. He came to every one of Jake's baseball games and sat in the parking lot where Linda couldn't see him. He attended Emma's school plays and stood in the back of the auditorium. He celebrated your birthdays alone in his apartment, saving money he couldn't afford to buy you gifts he could never give you. Frank felt tears running down his cheeks. Mom, you don't have to. Yes, I do, Helen said firmly. Because I might not get another chance. She looked at Linda with a mixture of sadness and determination. And you, Linda Morrison, need to stop running from the truth. These children deserve to know their father, and Frank deserves to know his children. Life is too short for this much regret. Linda looked up at Frank for the first time since the envelope had been opened. I'm sorry, she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Frank. I don't know how to fix what I've broken." Frank studied his ex-wife's face, seeing past the lies and manipulation to the scared, broken woman underneath. Despite everything she had put him through, despite 3 years of stolen time with his children, he felt something shift inside him. "We start by telling the truth," he said quietly. "All of it. And then we figure out how to be a family again." Emma stood up and walked to her father, wrapping her arms around him in the first hug they had shared in 3 years. Jake followed, and for a moment, Frank held both his children close, breathing in their familiar scents and feeling pieces of his broken heart begin to heal. "I want to know everything I missed," Emma said softly. "Every birthday, every game, every school play. I want to hear about all the times you were there that we didn't know about." "And I want to make up for lost time," Frank replied, "if you'll let me." Jake looked at his mother, who was watching the reunion with tears streaming down her face. "Mom, are you going to fight this?" Linda shook her head slowly. "No, honey. I'm going to help fix it. It's time I stopped being afraid of the truth." Helen smiled weakly from her hospital bed. "Now that's the ending this family deserves." 6 months later, Frank stood in the kitchen of the old Morrison farmhouse, making Sunday morning pancakes, while Emma set the table and Jake argued with his mother about his curfew. It was beautifully, perfectly normal. Linda had moved into the guest house on the property, and while their relationship would never be romantic again, they had learned to co-parent with respect and honesty. Helen's health had stabilized with treatment, and she spent her days teaching Emma how to bake her famous apple pies and showing Jake how to maintain the vegetable garden. The farmhouse was full of laughter again, full of the family conversations and gentle arguments that Frank had missed so desperately. As he flipped the last pancake, Frank caught sight of the old family photo from Lake Erie, now displayed prominently on the windowsill where the morning light made it shine. Emma had found it in the dirt that first day at his rental house, and now it served as a reminder of what they had almost lost forever. "Dad," Jake called from the dining room, "hurry up with those pancakes, I'm starving." "Coming," Frank called back, smiling as he carried the plate to the table where his family waited. They had found their way back home,